Hello friends, my name is Miss Johana and I'm a Tarleton State pre-service teacher. So today we're going to read a book called Paul Revere's Ride. This book will help us learn about a very important moment in American history, so right at the beginning of the American Revolution. So while we read, we're going to learn about Paul Revere, why he rode at night, and what people mean when they say the shot heard around the world. So first, let's talk about a few important things that will help us learn what's happening in our story. So have you ever heard the phrase, the shot heard around the world? So that means the very first shot that started the American Revolution. It happened during a big battle between American colonists and British soldiers. So here is a picture to help us imagine that moment of the shot heard around the world. It was a turning point in our history. And this is Paul Revere. He was a silversmith, a dentist, and he did something very brave that helped warn people before the battle started. And here is a map of the 13 colonies that made up early America. So back then, America was not its own country. It was a colony ruled by Britain. So that meant British people made the laws and the colonists had to follow them. And this is an image of Paul Revere with a lantern. So they were used to secretly send a message. So one lantern meant if the British were coming by land, and two lanterns meant they were coming by sea. So that's going to be very important in our story. And these are the red coats. So they were British soldiers. So you will also see them in our story. So in our book, it also talks about a group called the Sons of Liberty. So they were a group of colonists who didn't think it was fair that Great Britain was making rules and taxes for America without letting Americans have a say. So they worked in secret to stand up for what they believed that was right, and Paul Revere was part of this group. So before we read today's story, there are a few words I want to teach you so you'll understand them when we hear them in our book. So let's learn them together. So the first word is revolution. A revolution is a really big change. So the story talks about a revolution where people changed how the country was run. The second word is colony. A colony is a place that is ruled by another country. So a long time ago, America was a colony of Great Britain. The next word is country. Country is a place where people live together and have the same rules or government. The next word is taxes. Taxes means people have to pay the government to help pay for things like roads and schools. So back then, people got upset about unfair taxes. And the last word is patriot. A patriot is someone who loves and supports their country. Paul Revere was a patriot who wanted America to be free. So let's go ahead and read our book. So Paul Revere's Ride. Paul Revere was a busy man. Every day he worked in his silver shop. He made buckles and bowls. He made teapots and trays. He even made a chain for someone's pet squirrel. When people in Boston needed a false tooth, they came to Paul Revere. That's because Paul was also a dentist. He made a false teeth out of hippo tusk. At night, Paul closed his shop. He tucked his children into bed. He kissed his wife goodbye. Then he went to a secret club. The club was called the Sons of Liberty. The Sons of Liberty were mad because America was not its own country. America was a colony. It was ruled by Great Britain. British soldiers lived in America. The British added extra charges or taxes on things the American colonists bought. Many colonists did not think this was fair. They did not have a vote in making the laws, so they did not want to follow them. When the tax collectors came, the colonists tied them to flagpoles. They didn't get to vote or help make the rules, but they still had to pay taxes? That doesn't seem fair to me. How would you feel if someone made rules for you and you didn't get a say? And let's continue reading. They covered them with tar and feathers. They chased them out of town. The British stopped some of the taxes, but not all of them. They taxed tea. In 1773, 3 British ships landed in Boston. They were filled with tea. Paul Revere and the Sons of Liberty decided to fight back. They painted their faces so no one would know who they were. Then they climbed on board the ships. Smash! They opened the chest of tea. Splash! They dumped the tea into the water. That's it, said the King of England. He sent more soldiers to Boston to make the colonists behave. The colonists called the soldiers red coats because of their red uniforms. One day, Paul heard the redcoats were planning to march on the town of Concord. Concord was across the river from Boston. 2 of the colonial leaders, Sam Adams and John Hancock, were staying nearby in the town of Lexington. If the redcoats found them, they would arrest Sam and John. Paul had to warn them. It was a risky job. Paul and his friend Robert Newman had a plan. Robert would hang lanterns in Christ Church. They would be a warning in case Paul did not make it. 1 lantern meant the redcoats were going to Concord by land. 2 lanterns meant they were crossing the river in boats, then marching to Concord. So this is a very smart secret signal, like using a code. I'm going to remember that 2 lanterns means that British were coming by water. Why do you think Paul needed this secret plan? Let's continue reading. On April 18, 1775, the redcoats boarded their boats. Paul told Robert to hang 2 lanterns. The redcoats were going by water. Paul raced to the river. 2 of his friends waited with the rowboat. There are many stories about what happened next. One story says that Paul was in such a hurry he forgot his spurs. Luckily, Paul's little dog had followed him. Paul scribbled a note. He stuck it into the dog's collar. "Take this home," said Paul. The dog ran off. A few minutes later, he came back. He had the spurs in his collar. Another story says that Paul climbed into the boat, but he had forgotten something else. What if the redcoats heard the boat's oars creaking? A neighbor lady leaned out of her window. "What's wrong?" she whispered. Paul told her his problem. The lady threw her a petticoat down. "Good luck," she said. Paul tore the petticoat into strips. He tied them around the oars. We do not know if these stories are true, but we do know that Paul and his friends made it past the British. When they landed, Paul borrowed the horse. Then he galloped off into the night. Paul warned all the houses he passed. He had not gone far when a redcoat spotted him. "Giddy up," cried Paul. He left the officer in the dust. Paul finally found Sam Adams and John Hancock. He told them his news. Then he headed to Concord. 2 other colonists went with him. Suddenly, 6 redcoats jumped out of the woods. The other riders escaped, but Paul was surrounded. Was this the end for Paul Revere? No. Paul thought fast. He told the redcoats that hundreds of colonists were on their way. The soldiers were scared. They took Paul's horse, then they rushed off to save themselves. By now, it was almost morning. Paul had been riding all night, but he had one more job to do. John Hancock had told Paul there were important papers in a trunk in the town tavern. Paul had to get them before the redcoats did. He hurried into the tavern. Paul and a friend found the trunk. So a tavern is a gathering place where they share important news. So that's where he had went. But when they got outside, the town square was filled with redcoats. Bang! Paul heard a shot. Many people call it the shot heard around the world. That's because it was the first shot of the American Revolution. So that's a really big moment, the shot that started the American Revolution. It was the very first real battle, and it happened right after Paul reborn everyone. So I wonder if the people were grateful to Paul. The war lasted for 8 years. Paul stopped making silver. Instead, he made cannons and gunpowder. He printed money for the colonists to use. In 1783, the colonists won the war. America became its own country. Paul went back to making silver. He was still a busy man. He had lots of children and lots of grandchildren. In his spare time, he opened a hardware store and a copper mill. He also learned to make bells. For years, not many people knew about Paul's ride. Then in 1860, a poet named Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote a poem about it. Paul River became famous. And he still is in today in Boston, Christ Church. It still stands. Only now it is called Old North Church. Paul's silver still shines. Paul's house still welcomes visitors, and Paul's bells still ring out for all to hear. So that is the end of the book. So I have a challenge for you to do after this video. So I want you to act out the timeline of Paul Rivery's ride with your class, so you can remember all the important parts. So you can work with your teacher and classmates to act out each big event, like to seeing the lanterns galloping through the night, warning the colonists, and hearing the shot round the world. Thank you so much for learning with me today. See you next time.